Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last meeting of September. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Walker.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please bow your heads for a moment of silence and meditation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton, Mr. Duray, Ms. Green, Mr. Howard, Mr. Lamar, Mr. Levenstein, Ms. Mineo,
Here.
Mr. Stridiron, Mr. Walker.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matters made confidential under FERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, the review of program and placement of students with disabilities, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Roll call.
Mr. Duray, Ms. Green, Mr. Howard, Mr. Lamar, Mr. Levenstein, Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
See you in a bit.
Hold on one second, Mr. Harvey. We've got to get your mic on.
They're doing it. They're doing it.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to talk about the voter registration that we had today in collaborating with the school district and the library. It was a great thing to see the community come together and inform people. We got people to sign up to vote that haven't never voted before. So it was a great day. And I'd just like to say kudos to everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Manning Campbell.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you. Just want to share some highlights and some looking ahead bullets that we have as a community. We're receiving a lot of feedback about the updated policy regarding the use of cell phones and other electronic devices. The district is also requesting that all professionals put cell phones away and out of sight with the sound off during all meetings to act as models for our scholars. To that end, the executive cabinet, I'll ask you to put your phones away during this meeting so we are not utilizing phones during meetings.
And I'm going to follow up with that. Board members, I think we should model also. I turned my phone off and put it in my bag, so if you don't mind, please be a model for our students, and let's turn your phones off so we can pay attention and be focused exactly on what we're here for, and that is to do the best thing for our students in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That is really important because we're asking the professionals to do it. You know, we're in front of students and we're asking the students, so we should model what we expect. So thank you. NFA Ann Street welcomes students to the Ann Street location this morning, Tuesday, September 20th. Yes. Prior to this morning, students were receiving their academic instruction at the Newburgh Armory Unity Center, the Board of Education Auditorium, and Newburgh Free Library Building, Black Rock Forest, and the walkway over the Hudson. We are thankful for our community partners who helped us provide a welcoming and educational environment for our scholars during the first 2 weeks of school. And I have to say, on behalf of our school district, thank you for working with us, and the students were phenomenal. They were phenomenal. We also have a really, really talented and dedicated staff who they rolled up their sleeves and got the job done. So thank you to our staff. we sent a request to students, families, faculty, and staff encouraging students to express interest to act as a student representative. We're looking for 1 student from each building, 2 from Meadow Hill and Temple Hill. Students should be in grades 3 through 12. We're hopeful to meet with these students once a month and are looking for 2 representatives from the group to share updates with our Board of Education once a month as well. As of tonight, we only have 7 submissions, so please encourage your students to apply to be considered. We want to hear their voices, and if we're truly asking for student voice, then we have to get them at the table with us. Ms. Linda Romano was selected to serve on the New York State Education Department's Blue Ribbon Commission on Graduation Measures. The commission will be undertaking a thoughtful and inclusive process to explore what a New York State high school diploma means and what it should signify to ensure educational excellence and equity for all New York State. Ms. Romano is one of 10 educators selected in the greater Hudson Valley areas and is the only educator selected to represent career and technical education. She needs a round of applause. Newburgh is really the best kept secret. We have been analyzing accessibility of our streamed board meetings. So far, we have had 2 meetings to discuss language accessibility platforms of live streamed and in-person meetings. Additionally, we have gathered analytics for all regular and special Board of Education meetings since the organizational meeting of this board that was held on July 5th, 2022. Since that date, at the general, regular, and special meetings, we have had an average of 39 people view our meetings live as they are happening, and an average of 400 people viewing the recordings at their leisure after they have occurred. This evening, we hosted a successful virtual chat with Jackie for parents and guardians of 88 RSVPs. We had approximately 22 parents in attendance throughout the hour-long chat. They will continue as the year moves on. Looking ahead, a reminder, the district will be closed on Monday and Tuesday, September 26th and 27th for Rosh Hashanah. Additionally, the district will be participating in a county-wide early dismissal drill. All schools will dismiss 15 minutes earlier than their usual dismissal time. Families should expect their students home approximately 15 minutes earlier than they would normally be home. Communication for these dates will be shared with families and employees in advance. These key dates are also listed on the district's calendar that can be found on our website. That concludes my items. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have a discussion on live streaming of board meetings. So, Dr. Manning Campbell, would you like to start that discussion and explain why we're going to have an electric problem here?
Okay, thank you. So in order to be fiscally responsible, we thought that we would reduce the utilization of our technicians and live streams, because what we found after we've done the data is that we really have a lot of people who are viewing live, and most of our folks are viewing the recorded meetings. For example, I know I did give the average. Sorry, we have a spill. It usually is me. So on 7/5, we had 60 people view. We had 357 people, 60 people viewing live and 357 people watching the YouTube after. And I can go down. The next meeting, we had 49 live, 19 live, 43, 45, 18, and last week's meeting was 40, so we have an average viewership of 39 people while we're live. If we look at the folks who watch on YouTube, we had 357, 155, 401, 537, 253, 428, and 566 with an average of 400. So we have a total subscribers of 914. And what we've noticed is that it's really cost effective if we post the meetings within minutes after being here live, because it's just being fiscally responsible to the district. And I do have the figures and the numbers to share as needed.
Board members, questions or comments on live streaming? Yes, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. So going away from the live streaming, the access to the videos will be how much delayed? What's the delay time?
I believe within minutes, but I'll have Ms. Peterson respond.
They would be available the next morning. When you record a video that is live, we have to allow the system to kind of produce a recording, so the next morning they would be up.
Okay, so I'm hearing two different things. We said minutes, but now we're saying the next morning.
Because when you post a recorded video to YouTube, it could take 2 hours. It depends on YouTube. It's really a YouTube channel thing.
So we will be hopefully an hour delay, 2 hour delay, they will be able to see the meeting.
Yes.
So, Dr. Campbell, have we looked into reaching out to the community, explaining to the community that it will be readily available and where they can find it? But more importantly, have we let them know the reason, the fiscal reason for the change, and to invite them to the meetings now? Everything is open, face-to-face. Encourage them to come to our meetings and sit in the audiences?
So we have not done that fiscal presentation to the community. I know that we are hoping to put this forward tonight, and we would have a begin date. We would not cut the community off immediately to make sure that we got the information out to everyone, but we wanted to make sure that we had a discussion publicly tonight, because essentially every meeting that we run, to be completely transparent, because I know that that was a concern, we spend $1,000. So every meeting we have, it's $1,000 in overtime. So if you think about it, that's a lot of money.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Levinstein.
So is it still going to be possible for the link to the meeting to be posted on the website? I know it is there now and when it's live, but it's also there now after the fact. So it will remain there?
Yes. Ms. Peterson, would you like to add?
Thank you.
Yes, it still would be available.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? Yes, Mr. Duray.
I guess my concern is I'm not in agreement with this at all. I think we've done a horrible job of promoting the fact that these meetings are live streamed. I live in the district. I don't recall getting any notices. I know my daughter has children in the district, and yes, we post, I guess, that we're having a meeting, but I don't know if there's any text or anything that comes out today that says, hey, we're having a meeting tonight. It's going to start roughly 7 o'clock. We would certainly like you to watch if you can attend live. It is the 21st century. There's no one medium that works. There's no, an advertiser advertises in a magazine, on YouTube, on the television. Nobody chooses one thing. So I don't think we've given this a fair shot. I think the answer going forward, or not the answer, but a process would be, let's advertise to this community, see if the 39 becomes 100. If it's still 39, yes. But if it's not, then we're not promoting it properly.
Could I suggest a compromise?
Sure.
In the interim, couldn't we tape the committee meetings? Because those are also live streamed, and that would take away all those $1,000 for each one until we do what Mr. Duray says and talk about it with the community and then check the data.
Absolutely. What we'll do this for another month. We will certainly get the word out there in multiple mediums, and we will look at the data after that. All right? Thank you.
Mr. Lamar, did you have a comment?
I tend to agree with Mr. Doré. There are people out there that are watching live and are talking on the phone with their friends about it and are texting back and forth about it. There is a real-time engagement that's happening. I'm sorry to hear that it's not as many people. And I think trying to get more people to engage is really should be the solution. I think we might be jumping the gun with trying to cut it off now.
Ms. Burton?
So I think there's different levels to this. And for me, you know, and I know I've mentioned it, which is communication across the school district. And it's not just communicating in terms of allowing, you know, folks sitting at home to live stream here. It's also communication that is, you know, driven on every level, whether it's, who serves on committees, whether it's who doesn't, whether it's the same folk who sit on certain committees, whether folk know about them or don't know about them. We have school board, school committees that community doesn't know about. So I'd like to see a more comprehensive communication plan as opposed to, you know, spinning our wheels right here talking about whether we should be live streaming, you know, board meetings, particularly since they are available. Now, are any of these other committee meetings available that are open to the community? I don't know. I don't think so. You know, so if we're going to look at communication, look at it very broadly and very comprehensively, as opposed to just, you know, right now there's a few people who want to live stream, so let's just allow them to have that opportunity. Let's have everybody have an opportunity, equal opportunity to participate, be participatory in everything that calls for community and families and students to be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you. You go ahead. Mm-hmm.
We wholeheartedly agree with you. As a matter of fact, tonight during the chat, Dr. Freeman Mack was able to share that one of the things that we're looking into is an app called Remind, and that's also another communication protocol that we'll be able to have buildings sign up. We have not necessarily fleshed it out, but there will be something to that effect to start to engage families in terms of more communication. So yes, thank you for the feedback.
Any other questions from the board? I'd like to have a consensus on whether yes or no about committee meetings, not live streaming committee meetings at this point. So would you poll the board, please?
Ms. Green?
Wait, Mr. Lamore?
Yes or no on not streaming?
It will
Yes.
still be recorded, but not live streamed.
So do you want to do it a different way? You want to do live stream or recorded?
A yes vote is
Yes.
to not do it.
Yes.
That's what you just said.
All right, help me, Mr. McCoy,
Yeah,
make it
well,
simple.
we'll go with that. If you vote yes, the live streaming for committees would stop, the recordings would continue.
Thank you, that makes it clear. Go ahead.
Mr. Lamar?
No.
Mr. Levenstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. DeRay?
No.
Ms. Green?
No.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
The yeses have it, so they'll be recorded but not live streamed.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next section on the agenda, and that is board committees. Ms. Green, would you like to talk to us about the Curriculum and Instruction Committee?
Okay, the curriculum committee, we met last week and we discussed the resolutions that are on the agenda and had an update from Mr. Pinero, who is the director of the Newburgh.
Ms. Green, can you turn on your mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had it on.
Student, we'll go back.
I'm sorry, good evening. The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met last week and we discussed the resolutions and we had an update from Mr. Pinero, who is the director of the Newburgh Teacher Center, on summer professional development offerings, as well as an update on September 1st and 2nd Superintendent's Conference Day, building and district offerings. Just an update. Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you, Ms.
President.
Green. Mr. Howard, Policy Committee?
Thank you, Madam President. We had a conversation around policy number 5100, comprehensive student attendance, and we also had a conversation around the NISBA policy updates for 22-23. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Levenstein, Audit and Finance and Facilities.
Thank you, Madam President. So, Audit and Finance met September 13th. We discussed 10 resolutions that were on the September 13th board meeting, all of which were approved, including bills and reports, obsolete equipment, donations, revised bids, security, insurance, inspection, and conference requests. We also discussed future resolutions for kitchen repairs, which is on tonight's agenda, and we had an executive session. The Facilities Committee met September 14th, and we discussed with the capital bond design and construction teams the capital bond projects, including the design phase projects of New Windsor and the CTE. So New Windsor is waiting for final State Education Department approval with projected 2023 start date, and we discussed the redesign of the CTE building. We also discussed the current construction projects, which include Heritage and Vales Gate, with both interior and exterior construction. Heritage is approved and on schedule for a summer 2023 completion, and Vales Gate approved and on schedule for a summer 2023 completion also. And we also discussed construction safety and security, logistics, and concerns. And then the committee discussed with Mr. Velez the additional summer 2022 projects that were completed in all 15 buildings and future ventilation filter replacements. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to do the Personnel Committee, and all of the items on this agenda in the Human Resources section were discussed in this month's Personnel Committee, which met last Wednesday. So we're going to, since we had a little spill here, we're going to go back and we're going to do the parts that we missed. So we're going back to our superintendent, Dr. Manning Campbell.
Hi again. Thank you. Ms. Peterson? Thank you. Ms. Peterson is going to give us an attendance update.
At first, I thought that I wasn't going to have to present this. I got a little elated. Sure. Actually, I don't know if that's so sure, because then we start having audio issues. But let me. Okay.
If it goes back any further, we're going to have feedback.
I know. It's strategically placed, but Jim is going to help me out there. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so I am going to give an overview of the district attendance as well as goals for the 22-23 school year. As we know, this is going to be the overview of what I'm going to present tonight. I'm going to present just an overall district overview as well as attendance by location or our buildings. I'm going to review the special populations and also the focus. So we know that attendance is a collaborative process. We have to take information from teachers that see students daily. The attendance then has to be certified by clerks in our office, and sometimes there's questions or concerns that must be handled by administration. And our parents and students are the ones that review their attendance and ask us to get it right? To make sure that it's accurate and that it's reflecting their participation in school daily. So the first slide is about the average daily attendance. So what average daily attendance is, how many students do we have during a certain day in seats in front waiting for instruction? And this is a 4-year overview of the district attendance. You can see in 2017 and 18, that was our percentage, 93.9, and last year our overall average daily attendance was 89.1. 0.2. We still struggled a little in terms of COVID. We had many, and you will see that when I do the month-by-month analysis. But for the most part, our average daily attendance month to month was at or around 90 to 91%. We did have a slight dip in attendance in January. January sometimes can be tough because of the holidays. And in another part of my presentation, I'll speak to what occurs with some of our families during January, where our dip in enrollment happens. And if you remember last year, in January, we had the rise in COVID rates in our state. So that was also a time when people were battling illness. Chronic absenteeism is defined by students in grades 1 through 12 who are enrolled in our district for more than 10 school days. And if they are enrolled in school for more than 10 school days, if they are absent more than 10%, they are deemed chronically absent. Now, chronic absenteeism is a little bit of a moving target, right? So if I start the school year and I measure chronic absenteeism today, it's going to look different than when I measure it in May. So it's something that building leaders and teachers have to be aware of. We try to monitor it and embed interventions. If I look at the data from last year, our student populations that were most impacted were our homeless students, economically disadvantaged, and English language learners. We can see that our percentages, grades 1 through 8 and 9 through 12, were about around the same at 35%. If I look at our chronic absenteeism in the 4-year analysis, you will see that we have decreased our chronic absenteeism rate last year. However, we are still trying to make sure that we build interventions early so that we can address and lower this rate, because we know that students need to be in the seats daily. We also know that students that are chronically absent do not always do as well academically. They need to be present in person, receiving instruction on a consistent basis. If I look at this attendance comparison of our average daily attendance rates versus our chronic absenteeism, and just so that we're looking at the chart, our average daily attendance rates are represented in the gold color, and our chronic percentages are represented in the dark blue color. And what that shows us is that our building leaders have to monitor both. So I can have a very high average daily attendance rate. However, my chronic absenteeism rate can be significantly high as well. So we need to make sure that we're building interventions, we're looking at special populations, we're really trying to dig into that data and see the students who are not attending and build intervention. I'd like to really recognize South Middle School and their work around chronic absenteeism and average daily attendance rates in the district this year. So I know that South Middle, they have a system going over there, and they have really, really worked hard to make sure that they have the culture and climate within their building to make students and family engaged in learning. So if you look at their average daily attendance rate last year, they had the highest in the district with 94.14 and the lowest chronic absenteeism rate. And what that means is the building is looking at student data and they're analyzing and trying to intervene if a student is not attending. So, kudos to them. And one of the ways that they recognize that, we're making sure that they had incentive programs. These are a couple of pictures from attendance incentive programs last year. The first 2 pictures are from South Middle School. Sometimes there's assemblies. I know they've done things like dance-offs and different things like that. I know that the next picture is Vales Gate Elementary School. They actually kind of took the students across the street for improved attendance. And the reason I say improved attendance and not perfect attendance is because we want improvement. We want improvement. We want our students to be, there may be something that is beyond their control that is inhibiting them from attending daily. We need to make sure that we help them resolve so that they can attend. And that's what the attendance intervention teams and our PPS staff and teachers do daily. So let's talk about our special populations. So here are the average daily attendance rate for some subgroups within our district. our English language learners, exceptional learners, and students that are impoverished. And as you can see, our rates are still need to be improved upon. If I look at the 3-year analysis, they're still considerably lower than where they were 3 years ago, and they're not as high as we need them to be. We would like them to be in over 90%. We want those special populations in school because we know that they do struggle academically and they need to be participating in instruction. So our attendance recommendations and focus for the 23-22 school year is to really help our interventions team to continue to focus on their building-based intervention plans. So last year they gave their attendance intervention plans, and we want them to make sure that they're sharing them into the community, their school community, with their parents, and that they're really focused on improving early intervention and school climate around areas of concern. We also want to make sure that they're using district resources. We're excited with the training and programs that we have that help analyze and identify students that are struggling with daily attendance. We also need to continue to train our staff around the certification of attendance, and that comes from monitoring classrooms as well as actual certification, and those things come through the attendance intervention teams, and we really want to make sure that we are also taking parents' calls and concern and educating parents. What does your portal account look like? If there's a concern, what is the process that you go to correct that concern? We also really want to work with our family and community engagement team around long-term absences. I talked briefly about family trips and emergencies that tend to happen in January. And for many that have been in education, this is no surprise. We have students that sometimes take absences greater than 10 or 15 days in the winter months, and it significantly impacts, and we need their education, and we really need that outreach into the community for them to understand that those long gaps in attendance impact their child academically. So we plan on engaging families around how we can try to intervene and what we can do to get students to be in attendance. Are there any questions?
Board members, any questions on this presentation? Yes, Ms. Burton, I see your.
So this is daily attendance annually. So are you tracking students that have chronic absenteeism for, let's say, 3 years in a row, or how do you do that?
So that's why we want to make sure that our attendance intervention teams are aware of what data resources. I know that we mentioned the integration of Panorama as well as reports that they do have available to them. As we start reviewing the reports, and this is part of the work with the intervention teams in the fall, there's a way for buildings to identify which student take the data down to a granular level. And that's really what the attendance intervention teams do. In a building, you can have a subpopulation that you really need to improve their attendance. You can pull the chronic absenteeism report. They could say, okay, you know, I have 35% of my Ls that are chronically absent. I can drill that down to the individual student. I can have that list go to my PPS team and really look at what has been inhibiting. Sometimes it could be something as simple as I have the wrong address and transportation is impacted. It could be as simple that a family may not have the knowledge or the resources to fill out an alternative bus. So that is something that the attendance intervention team does, as well as the PPS team, to try to help facilitate pathways for students to attend daily. PPS. Oh. Pupil personnel services, social workers, psychologists, and school counselors work on with the attendance intervention teams.
I know Mr. Howard has a question.
Ms. Burton, you have a follow-up question, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Howard.
So, you know, when we look at our dropout rate, and so what can we have that data in terms of, if you look at someone, a student that drops out, without knowing the data of any particular student, I think we all can pretty much surmise that there's been some absenteeism issues, right? Are you looking at it from that perspective? Like, when you say intervene, so you have these transitional periods, right? A young person's going from elementary to middle school. Middle schools it's tough. It's tough on a lot of different levels. And then from middle to high school, only to potentially maybe not make it through high school. So are you looking at that kind of data?
So that kind of data is what we hope that with the combination of Panorama as well as our state reports, that we can cross-reference and get that data. Transition across grade levels is definitely a point where there can be concerns. Students stop attending. Those were when different routines are changed. And I think that we do have to give families that extra support around that transition. I know that many of the transition teams, whether they're school counselors or psychologists, and I think that has been, with the board's support, the great support of the elementary support services, is to have those conversations with students that have been chronically absent. And as a new building leader, what is important as well is that your transition list, you can get that information with level 2 reporting, because you can drill down from a district level on who has been chronically absent in the previous year. So if I'm a principal on an attendance team of a 6th grade team, I can pull that information together and give it to the team and say, these students were chronically absent last year. And I think that that method of data analysis is something that we're still learning, right? So we're still learning what's accessible, and we're still learning how to use those programs. And that is going to be some of the focus of the intervention teams. I think that they've done a really great job in what they have, and we're hoping that these extra supports, whether they're Panorama or the RIC reports, understanding how they work, understanding how they can pull down that information, can help build better interventions.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. Great presentation. And I want to applaud South Middle School for what they're doing and the numbers that they have over there. But bigger than that, I'm a firm believer that when something's done right, you model that behavior. So what is being done at South Middle School that makes their numbers do what they're doing? Because our district is a district that's made up of Newburgh and Lawrence City School District. And most of our buildings reflect each other, and they look like each other, and they have the same breakdowns in those buildings. What is South Middle School doing that other buildings aren't doing, or whether they're not doing that other buildings are doing? And also, I understand that chronic absenteeism is 10%. Do we wait till 10% to engage and to put interventions in place, or do we say, okay, someone's not here earlier, and we might say a 3% flag or a 7% flag, or do we wait till 10%? Because I think we should engage earlier, and just understanding that kids don't just not come to school. Most of the kids that fall in these areas, in these gaps, there's something going on at home, there's something that's happening in that family, there's something happening in that home or in that environment where they're living. There's something that we can engage and get involved earlier. And do we reach out to engage other support services, i.e. DSS, and other people come and play, the wraparound services that help us engage some of these problems that are causing chronic absenteeism?
What I have to say is that I think that COVID taught us a lot, and I think South Middle School during that time, but there are other building leaders that definitely, their practices and their recommendations to me as I came into the executive leadership and started to oversee attendance, because attendance has been a very frightening kind of situation, and we had to make sure that people understand, whether it's been clerical training, right? Clerical training, making sure that attendance is being certified correctly, that we all understand the policies. I think that the system of having the conversations and asking the questions and having that open door. If you have a question, call me. If you're a principal, if you're a clerk, if you're a teacher, if something is not working, I need to know so that I can try to fix it. Sometimes when you're in a large district, there are certain things in terms of training where we have to make sure that everyone trains and understands. And I think what they've done at South Middle School is just make sure that the training is involved. I think that they've done intentional work around chronic absenteeism and making sure that the staff understands. They've had a really great system, and the intervention plans, part of that came from them working with an attendance teacher and an attendance team saying, hey, this is what we do, Ms. Peters, like this is how we intervene, this is how we engage our families. And I looked at that and I said, you know what, this is really good. And I started to replicate it. I said, you know what, this is what we all need to do to make sure, and many buildings are doing it. They do have the certification training. I think the clerks being able to have an open door, to have the conversation like, I just messed up. I just messed up, and what do I do? And I said, okay, we're going to fix it. We're going to let's go through it. Let's pull out our policy. Let's pull out our procedures, and let's make sure that you understand what your job is. Because I think the team of people certifying and the team of people taking have really invested in trying to make sure our attendance is right. So that has assisted a little.
Follow-up question. So I think it's so important that we operate as a team, as a district, and that work should be trickled down from the top. What should be done, how we do it, and what needs to be done, and then we have uniformity in dealing with this problem, because chronic absenteeism is a huge problem, and I don't want us to get behind the 8 ball and then engage too late. And I would love if we had early flags like that red, blue, green system that we use for, red, yellow, green. If we can have a system somewhat like that for absenteeism, so a flag that goes up. Kids, like I hate to keep saying the same thing, kids do not just not come to school.
Right.
There's something going on there.
Right. So buildings, as of early as last week, I know that CNI has reached out to buildings of students who have not. Where are the students that are not in our seats that are enrolled with us? I've been working with my registration team on enrollments and disenrollments. How are we making sure that this system is moving? Is everyone accounted for? You know, I have a building level leader saying that someone didn't show up. Did we check our disenrollment file? Are they supposed to be here? We are a large organization. We had a lot of enrollments, but we also have a lot of disenrollments. Do we have all of our paperwork done? And really checking those resources and making sure if it is a transportation issue, if it is a student that moved, that we're addressing it and identifying it early. So that work is going on with our support teams in our building as we speak.
A rhetorical question, last question. Is that department big enough? Do we have enough people doing that work?
I'm gonna defer to the superintendent. I think it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but we're doing it, and they're doing a great job at it.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamar?
It was a great presentation, thank you. I was wondering, when we do have a situation where a child is out for an extended period of time, and there's been no dialogue with the parents, what recourse do we have at that point? How do we move forward if the parents have been tried to be contacted and we're not getting any kind of response?
So I think I heard your question, but I want to make sure. So if I as a parent, if I'm seeing something on my attendance record that I know is not correct.
No. If there is a student that is not attending for an extended period of time, say we go 8 or 10 days without a student showing up and reaching out to the parents hasn't been so successful, where do we go from there?
Okay, so that's where our student support teams, our social workers, sometimes our teachers and our APs, they all come together and they say, the first line is the teacher, right? The teacher tells us whether or not the student is there. Building intervention systems can vary throughout the district due to the size. So if I have a smaller building, it could be a conversation. I'm walking to the social worker or the school counselor saying, I'm having a problem, I've called, I've reached out, I'm not getting anywhere. Our social workers and our attendance people are trained to bring it to the next level, whether that may be reaching out, going through the complete academic and social history file. If it's a transition situation like Mrs. Burton, it's a sixth grader, I'm going to reach out to the prior building. I'm going to look through the PLP. I'm going to pull the permanent file. I'm going to do that intervention search. I'm going to refer to a home visit. I'm going to go to a home visit, knock on a door, see if the person's there. If the person is not there, sometimes we in our system can identify siblings and relatives that are on the contact list. Why is Onyx not coming to school? So then that intervention is done. If it's a certain amount of days and it has occurred, they're still not attending, that's when we do the referral. Sometimes we get community-based agencies. We've had different interventions, and I know Mr. Bear can probably speak to the different things that his team does in terms of trying to make sure that we're making those community connections and making sure that those supports are there to engage the family in coming back to school and attending.
Who does the home visit if it gets to that point?
So there's a variety of people that do home visits. They do go in teams. Sometimes it's an attendance teacher and a social worker. We've had principals. Many principals have gone out. I know during COVID, we've also had the re-engagement street teams where we had all members of our personnel showing up, whether it was school monitors, different people, nurses. We've had a variety of different people, especially on the tail end of COVID, go and do home visits. On the regular, we know that home visits is not the only evidence-based way to engage a family. So we want to make sure that we have a variety of different ways that we're reaching out to make sure that they can attend.
Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for the report. Data is very important, and if you could pull up slide 7, please. I just want to question on that a little bit.
Yep.
Yes. Where it's broken down by grades 1 to 8 and 9 to 12.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what that is, correct? The gold is 1 to 8, and the blue is 9 to 12. So it's interesting that the elementary school percentages surpass, well, I shouldn't say grades 1 to 8 surpassed the high school grades for chronic absenteeism. That grew. And if you look at the percentages from the 2017 to 2022, the elementary school, the percentage is over 100% that it grew in chronic absenteeism, and the 9 to 12 grew by a hair over 50%. So it's showing that the lower grades are increasing much more rapidly than the high grades. So my question is, if you broke it down further by grade, would it show more of this? And is there certain grades because of COVID that ended up second grade because they didn't go to school for 2 years? Is that the major cause of it? But it seems odd that the rate increased a lot more from 1 to 8 versus 9 to 12.
So as a data person, I'm going to have to pull that, and I can do that grade level analysis and provide it to you. We want a low percentage with chronic absenteeism. I can just tell you from my experience dealing with building level leaders and overseeing the data last year, at the elementary level, we saw a lot more of students just saying, well, you're not feeling well, why don't you stay home? Or, a lot of that went on. Also, we had a lot of students traveling more frequently. We have to remember, for some families, they did not see their families in a long time due to COVID. So when travel was kind of lifted, they went, and school became secondary at that point. And we know that we were all coming out of a pandemic, but I'll do that grade level analysis and get it to the board.
Sorry. All right, thank you. The other thing that we should also remember, Mr. Forget said it on mic as well, a lot of students, and folks had COVID, and so they were in and out of school, and that also, had an impact during that time frame as well. Thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm just going to say it. This is an issue, this is a problem that's bigger than us, and it really is. And I know last year we had a meeting where we had people sitting around the table, community-based organizations, government services, and they were here talking about what they can do, how they can assist us with some of the issues we have in our district. And I think with this chronic absenteeism and stuff of that nature, are we sharing information with the right people? Are we reaching out? Are we making it a collaborative effort where, you know, we're trying to get everyone involved? Because the bottom line is this. I know you guys do an incredible job. I know we do an incredible job in the district, but we cannot do this alone. We cannot do it alone. We have to engage people in the community. We have to engage our government services. We have to engage people that can also help us with the wraparound services, because I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. This thing's going on in some of the households in our district and our communities where education is not priority number one. It's about getting up. It's about eating. It's about feeding. It's about a roof over our head. It's about other things that are impacting kids not attending school and being here and getting the education that they should be getting. Are we reaching out to these other organizations for help?
We have been reaching out to those organizations. Do I think that we need more collaboration? Always. We've tried to also create programs by which we engage families, and we also give them basic needs as well. I know the family and community engagement team, as well as the registration team, have collaborated on a lot of events in collaboration with the Armory, as well as back to school events, as well as just general services and just operations of how the district, how to engage the district, and how you can get access and support over a concern. I do think that we are continuing to build those relationships with community-based services, and I'm kind of wanting to tag in Chris or Natasha to answer some of that question, because I'm blanking right now.
So we do make a concerted effort to engage our community resources and our different organizations that do help us. I just, I don't want to overstate COVID, because every time the answer to these questions is it's COVID. Every system was compromised during this time, including this past year. So when you ask what interventions we put in place and what communities we reached out to, they absolutely wanted to help us. But they often suffered from the same staff shortages or inability to meet. Kids weren't meeting to get mental health services in person. They were doing it virtually, and that isn't always the best model for some of our kids. We had previously reported to the board that there was evidence that showed 3 million students were missing in the United States off the rolls during COVID. And some of our kids are included in the chronic absenteeism, because we can't remove a child from our attendance if we don't know where they are. So they still show up on our rolls. So there are the unknown and then the known. So, I don't want to overstate COVID, but we certainly do reach out to them. We have great relationships. We have started under Sarah Van and Onyx's leadership, the interagency collaboration, which we talked about. We're able to bring these situations to a community of people who can help us come up with a collective solution. In addition to that, we do turn kids over and have CPS, or the Office of Probation, involved, but they've changed their models as well, where they're primarily preventative. They have realized that they can't mandating interventions don't work. They found many years that did not work. So most of the time when we do reach out to these individuals, they offer services that parents can volunteer to be part of. The notion of mandate doesn't exist the way it did 10 years ago, even 5 years ago in the preventative world. So absolutely, we use these services. We have great resources, and it's always a challenge to get families to go to those services and sustain those services. And families were compromised in many ways during this time. That also compromised the attendance piece. And I know, just anecdotally, many kids were afraid to come to school. I had a number of conversations virtually with kids where they and their families really felt uncomfortable with coming to school. And when COVID hit hard sometimes in the family, they just wouldn't come. So I don't want to overstate that, but it's a reality.
Ms. Green?
I see there was a big jump from 2018 to 19, but it looks like a year is missing there from 2019 to 2020. So I was just wondering, because there was a big jump
So we're missing a year, so I'm wondering if that was gradual or?
No, that missing year was the start of COVID, so it
yes.
wasn't significantly,
Significantly, I got you.
statistically significant enough to represent, because it wasn't a representation of what we
Okay.
consider to be a normal attendance year. So I did not include it because it makes the analysis.
Okay, but it's just like a big jump though, so
Yeah.
that's why I was asking. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lamar, Ms. Burton, turn off your mic until I call on you, please.
I'm just looking up there as well. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do to get back to those 2017-18 numbers. But were we at the time happy with those numbers? I mean, I know, look, obviously, everyone going to school and no chronic absenteeism would be the goal.
Right.
But where is the target so that we can say we've gotten to a place that is realistic?
Well, I think a realistic target, there's a lot of things with chronic absenteeism. Yes, do we want to be lower? Would we like to see a rate of, I would like to see a 0% rate. I would like students to be in class every day. But we also have to look at the demographics and the populations that we serve, right? So something as simple as a change of address. For some families, that's very easy. I have my driver's license, I have my utility bill. Here you go. I'm changing my address, I can get my transportation fixed. Sometimes it's not that easy for our families, and it does take time, and they need to have assistance and support to go through that system. So I think that as we analyze this is going to be a question that the board, and I know that, I don't know.
What's the definition of chronic absenteeism?
A student that is absent more than 10% from school.
Does that include excused and unexcused, or just unexcused?
It includes excused and unexcused, anything that is not academic. So if I have a student that comes in and they go to a field trip, that doesn't count against them. But if they're absent or sick, that does, even with a doctor's note, that still counts against them.
Ms. Burton?
So I want to piggyback on what Mr. Howard was saying in terms of involving community agencies in the process. And, you know, as someone who has worked with middle and high schoolers for quite a long time, one thing that we did do was we tracked attendance. And so I think the other question is, what are these agencies actually measuring? Because how can you compare an agency who is not tracking the attendance of their students they may be working with? Then it's kind of like you can't then quantify, is it working or not? So if you know, and I can call out a few, but I won't. But let's say there is an agency that collects that data. Are we literally working with them and making sure that there's this alignment in terms of why we're working with you? We're working with you because we have certain subgroups, and I say this specifically around poverty because we know a lot of funds come into the city of Newburgh to a myriad of organizations in response to poverty. And this is not a new dynamic. This has been happening for decades. And I'm at a point in my life, you know, at my age where I can say, well, dang, we've been doing this 30 years ago. The same, you know, issue, right? Poverty, academic performance, you know, low attendance. It's not a new scenario. And so I just say, you know, when we're working with these agencies, you know, I'm not suggesting that they're not doing good work. I'm just suggesting, you know, are we clear on we're measuring apples to apples and not apples with oranges, you know, because folk will sit around the table and they will say all the good things that they have offered, but is it indeed affecting, you know, what we're considering chronic absenteeism? And so that when you work together, you're working in collaboration in response to a very specific need.
Mr. Forget, you want to talk to that?
I just wanted to mention something that Dr. Campbell mentioned just a few seconds ago. I think we really have to take a look at the excuse codes and break down the excuse codes as to why is the student chronically absent? What are the patterns we're seeing between an excused absence for being sick or family emergency or one of our other codes? Break those down and then try to associate that with the subpopulations. Where is the subpopulation of economically disadvantaged really showing in chronic absenteeism, and what's the reason? Because once we get to what the reason is, then we can find the solution. But I think that this is such new information that's coming out with chronic absenteeism, even though it's been for several years, that gap that we had with COVID really did affect us. But now we got to get back on our game, and exactly what Mr. Lamar said. We're not happy with those 17, 18 numbers. We were really concerned about those back then. Now we're even more concerned. But I think we really have to dig into this study of the data in order to determine the intervention and direction we move.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to say to us as a board, I think this is a great opportunity with the upcoming budget season that we talk about where we're appropriating that money. What are we doing with our family community engagement team? Do we have enough people in the right places that's really impacting this work? And I think that the money needs to follow the need. And if we need to increase some of the departments, or we need to put more people in certain places. But this is such an important topic, absenteeism. And he made an incredible question. Are we satisfied with those numbers? Because that's people that we're leaving on the bench. And we really need to find a way to really impact those numbers and really go after those kids so that truly all means all. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you. We now have a summer school presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Manning Campbell. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Gawaki and Ms. Mojica to the podium to give a presentation on information and highlights from our ESYP, our extended school year program for elementary. This summer, before they begin, I just want to say I'm really excited. We've heard for several years from principals, teachers, parents, and even students that they would like to attend the program, their summer program, in their own building. So this year, through the American Rescue Plan stimulus funds, we were able to create those opportunities in each building, all 9 buildings, so the K-5 buildings and the 2 Hill buildings. We did 2 3-week sessions, 12 days at each building, and Ms. Mojica and Mr. Gawaki are going to present some highlights and some data. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, Superintendent Manning Campbell, board members, senior cabinet. Thanks for having us. Summer school was a lot of fun this year. We've been doing it as a dynamic duo for the last few summers, so it's been a blast. So this year we provided, it was a different breakdown of having multiple sites, so we provided master schedule expectations to all the sites with principals, and so that they could develop their own program because it was based up on the needs of their building. But we wanted to have that uniformity of expectations from the district of what we'd like to see, and then how they did it was up to them in the building level to make it specific for their learners. And then as a platform to make sure that we're uniform, we used a Google site for our main mode of communication to ensure that everyone has access to the class list, any recommendations, organizations, help, supports, things along those lines were all in one spot for all the 9 sites that we are able to manage on a daily basis. We always like starting the day off with SEL and having a mindful moment. A lot of programs also started and ended the day with circles to really check in and connect with the kids. We had a 60-minute ELA block, a 60-minute math block. We wanted the kids to have fun and have a camp-like feel. We want it to be fun. It's summer. They're coming. They're giving their extra time, and it was open for all students. So we had project-based learning and a learning lab block built into the schedule, and, of course, recess. Yeah. Okay. So 2 years ago, Ms. Moriarty and I were talking, and Ms. Mojica were thinking, how do we increase family engagement? How do we make sure parents know when their kids go to summer school that they know what they're learning? So we came up with this idea of creating like a passport. So we were talking, we thought around Disney World, because when you go around Disney World in Epcot, you can earn little stickers along the way with your kid. And we thought, what a great idea of using our standards that are parent-friendly language, where kids can earn Goldie backs. So over a 6-week period or the 12-week period, as they master that standard, they earn a Goldie back sticker, which then they could bring home to their families at the end so the parents know, hey, we know what they're learning. But also, we put it on a spreadsheet so that at the end of the summer, the buildings who sent their kids to summer school recommended knew what standards they mastered and how did that student who's struggling or was excelling mastered and was like, yes, this is great. So we had an actual accounting for what they were learning in summer school and what they covered. Because we thought that was a missing piece that we could add on to there. So for this end, the creation of the passport was done with collaboration of all the directors at central office and curriculum and instruction, because they did a ton of work getting to that standard for families in a nice way, but also we worked with them to identify the 6 or the 4 most important ones, the biggest power standards that we have, our biggest bang for our buck, that we were struggling based off the needs assessment, looking at data so that we really could be tight and focused and strategic on our instruction over the summer. So what this chart shows down below, we did an analysis of how many kindergartners this summer earned a Goldie back for their standards. So kindergarten, 93%, so 1,264 out of 1,352 Goldie backs were earned. So that means out of our kindergarten students, they earned 93% of Goldie backs possible. So in that 12-day period, they were very successful. And down the way of the success rate of their mastering that standard, and they were preventing that summer slide from occurring.
Okay. So if we dig a little deeper into our data, right, you have your ELA data. Your number one goal for ESY is to actively prevent your summer slide. Right now, with our ESY programs, we had no students regress, according to IRLA. We used our, yes, round of applause. Absolutely. The way we were able to measure that, though, was we used our end-of-year IRLA reading levels as our beginning of ESY assessment. Then at the end, we did a levels accuracy check to measure the student's reading level in 12 days. Right? I'm going to remind, in 12 days, no one regressed. Additionally, 5% of our students increased their reading level across the district. That 5% may sound, oh, it's 5%, that's great. But that's 12 days across 9 buildings. That's significant work that the teachers put in as well as our students. Additionally, we used our Lit Camp curriculum, which is specifically designed for that summer camp feel, offering a variety of resources and literature books, in addition to engaging our students in just a different approach to literacy. I have some notes because I think I forgot something. Within that, it also includes activities and lessons for teachers to look at that would engage students as well during those 12 days. So for math, as we know, math is definitely a target for our district in all buildings, especially at the elementary level. However, during our ESY, we were able to show that on an average, 4 points increase in their assessments. Those assessments for beginning of year were developed with curriculum and instruction with our math director, and those were given at the beginning of the ESY as well as the end. Again, teachers also had access to lessons that were standards-based, that were aligned to our passport, as well as activities for students so that they were targeted so that they could meet the needs of the students versus the needs of the entire classroom. It allowed us to differentiate in a way that really allowed for the increase that we saw in your assessments for our ESY. That's you.
So for social emotional learning, we already know that's super important, and our buildings followed the programs that were at the current school, so that the kids had the continuity and they knew the familiarity so they could jump right in. We had social workers, school counselors involved at the sites doing groups, making sure kids are checking in and following along those at Exceptional Learners. Exceptional Learners programs is a 30-day program. It is mandated for our students who are in 1211s or 812s to prevent that summer slide. We were able to, and you also thank you for approving the contract with Playworks. And Playworks was able to come in have 4 fun Fridays for our Exceptional Learners, focusing on cooperative, fun, engaging games that are definitely tailored to our exceptional learners, but also a great resource for any teacher to be able to use during recess, and having that really promoting engaging recess fun activities. So we wanted to have those students really have a fun time because they are there for 30 days and we want to keep them engaged. SEL members pushed into classrooms. As you can see, Lit Camp, it's really engaging in building a campsite and a campfire, and the teachers and the students ran with it and they did their circles and checked in that. And it was amazing to see some hallways just turn into like a full-blown campsite. And the kids were so engaged and like ready to read and wanted to go to their reading nook, but also connect with each other. And there was a great student-to-teacher ratio, so they were able to really have a great summer this year.
So as you can see, across 9 buildings, we had just over 1,200 students enrolled. We didn't turn away students in enrollment. What we did see, though, we did see an interest of students going to Blackrock, 21st Century, and let's be honest, vacation. A lot of parents took opportunities that did conflict with some of our building openings, that did impact attendance, and we saw that where, you know, Mrs. Mojica, I signed up my child for 3 weeks, but my child can attend 2 out of the 3. Can he or she still come? Absolutely. Please. I understand that it's not the full 3 weeks, but 8 days is better than 0 days, especially for students that need intervention or that extra step. So with that, we did see some discrepancies that we weren't anticipating. However, the students that were coming were engaged. They were staying the entire time, right, from drop-off to pick-up for that half day, and they were learning, and clearly, based on our assessments, they were able to at least actively prevent that summer slide.
Okay, so student celebrations, so we wanted in the 12 days every site to have celebrations and be able to present about their campsite. So I know there's a jam-packed agenda, but if they're all hyperlinked, so on your free time, please click on the link. It'll bring you to the district website, which shows the celebrations for each of the sites. They're just a dynamic group of students, and it was so much fun to be able to go to the 9 sites and support them and work with our colleagues in a different capacity. So thank you, and we appreciate everything, so thank you.
Board members, questions? Yes, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to commend you guys. This is an incredible program, and I really think that it's really helping our children, especially post-COVID. So a couple questions that I do have. I know historically summer school was something that was thought about for remediation or kids to catch up. What was the split of kids that came for rigor as opposed to remediation, but bigger than that? Is there any opportunities for us to get more families engaged, i.e., those summer programs, they're planned early. So have we thought about engaging, having that conversation with parents in September, October, November, December to talk about next summer so that they can move the vacation from maybe July to August so that it impacts more kids? Because I'm a firm believer, kids in front of our incredible teachers for a long amount of time, it impacts the summer slide that hits our kids every year. It pushes the summer slide off because now kids, instead of being off for the whole month of July and August, now they're engaged academically in July, which helps impact that summer slide so that when they come back in September, there's not a big catch-up to get back to where we ended. So have we had conversations in regards to that?
I think Ms. Moriarty is.
So I'm actually going to take that. You're hired, because that's the conversation that exactly we've been having in curriculum instruction with principals, with directors, and as senior staff members, because we realize the need and the impact that we can have. Also, we'll continue to have our break programs, so over our holiday break, at the Christmas break, the midwinter break, we're going to have, and at the spring break. So we'll continue those this year too. So thank you.
Awesome. And add a couple more fun places for these kids. They love it. I know I talked to some kids that were engaged in some program, and I talked to their parents, and they were ecstatic. They really enjoyed it. And they couldn't stop talking about Fridays. Fridays was their day. Fridays was their day.
I'd like to make a comment about your student passport. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
You know, for me, having experience in an elementary school, this is what kids like. They like that feedback, and I think the teachers like it because they had specific goals that they could reach with their kids and say, yeah, you did it, you did it, you did it. That's really wonderful. So thank everybody for that, because that looks like a joint effort between, you know, the principals, the teachers, as well as the directors. So
Yeah,
thank you.
that was a big project, so thank you.
Madam,
And it was explicit for students. It was explicit for students. Students instantly knew, oh, I've mastered this, and then that was communicated to parents at home.
I love that.
And teachers would have it on kids' desks so that they knew, and it was easy to keep track of who had the Goldie back and who earned it, who didn't.
Great feedback, great immediate feedback, so they know, and success breeds success. So thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
Yes, and
Howard.
Madam President, I just want to say, so as we have these conversations, we just had a conversation around attendance and stuff like this, but real talk, if we fix it at the early levels, it improves the opportunity and outcomes for kids going forward. If we fix the issues and the problems and make kids lifelong learners at the elementary grade level, and they want to be here, they like what they're getting, they're excited about being in school, that helps us in middle school and high school. I'm a firm believer in that.
I see people nodding, so we all agree, I think. That's the truth. Board members, any other questions for Mr. Glowicki and Ms. Mojica? Thank you very much. And we have secondary, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Our secondary summer school program was directed and overseen by Ms. Blunt and Mr. Cameron. And they have presentation for you tonight.
Hold on 1 second. We got to get your mic back on. Hold on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Blount.
And Andrew Cameron.
And we're the new dynamic duo. We're both new administrators to Newburgh, and we took the challenge of taking on summer school. We did have some support from some administrators from high school. We had Mr. Kavanaugh. He supported us for 3 weeks. And we had Damian Lamb and Howie Harrison support us at the middle school for 3 weeks at a time.
Thank you. Just to talk a little bit about our program that we had at the high school. It was 4 days a week. It was about 4.5 hours. Students were registered by the guidance counselors the last week of June. And we did have, thanks to Ms. Peterson's recommendation, in-person registration for the first time in several years, which we had a robust, a huge number of parents turn out with their children to come into our building. All the schools, secondary as far as high school, were housed at NFA Main. Like I said, 4.5 hours. Our schedule is pretty flexible, that we had 4 periods of instruction, about 69 minutes. And it was spread out to, we had math or algebra offered the first period or second or third. So students who are really needing those classes could take the advantage of being able to participate in those courses that were offered at that time. Of course, it was 100% in person. We did have a program held at South Middle School for middle school students, 6 through 8, and we had newcomer programs set up in both buildings, which is our E&L population. And kudos to our E&L teachers who did a huge job of really recruiting and attaining students throughout the summer as well, so kudos to them. We also had the Empire program, which is funded by the Empire Grant, and that was really basically, archery. There were some outdoor programs, science programs as well. And really, those were programs that were really enrichment, not for students who were at credit recovery.
So what you see here is all the core courses. We had an elaborate number of offerings for our students. And we had everything for ELA, social studies, a variety of science courses, electives, and language courses. And we had about 4 seniors that needed independent studies, so that was important as well. We were able to have 4 classes, so students were able to earn up to 4 credits, and we had some students that were seniors that needed 5, so they were able to have an independent study. I'll move to the next slide.
And some of those programs for the Empire that we just discussed previously, drumline guitar program, visual arts, STEAM, and really barbering, film and fiction, fitness, health and wellness, Empire coding, robotics, and Black Forest that was obviously off-site. And again, that was a program that was headed up over towards the end of the main building, towards the center of the lobby. When you come up, we house those programs there. So we kept it separate from where our students for credit recovery were housed. We thought that was extremely important for that. But again, we oversaw that program as well.
So getting into a little dive of our enrollment data, as Mr. Cameron said, for high school, we had an opportunity to have in-person registration, which worked out really well, and I understand that the parents and students really like that. Unfortunately, for middle school, it was more promotion and doubt, students that failed 2 courses or more, so the guidance counselors enrolled those students, and those are the number of students that were enrolled in both programs. And then our attendance data. So as you can see, we have the middle school and high school data, and all grade levels 6 through 12 had an average of at least 85% or more.
This was real data, difficult to really think about because it was knowing that when you drop a child that they're not able to gain that credit that was lost during the school year. So we literally ran a report from July, we gave them the first 2 days, so July 6th and 7th were really gimmies, and then we ran it for basically the first 2 weeks of the program. And again, we had a brochure, there's pamphlets, parents came in for in-person registration, so they really knew our expectation out front that if you missed more than 3 classes, that you would be dropped. So that one Friday, July, I think it was 17th, we unfortunately had to drop students who had missed 4 classes or more at that point. So pretty much 400 drops, and each one individually. So it was extremely difficult to swallow to actually do that, and then we notified the parents robocalls to check their Infinite Campus, that the new schedule was there. We did field a lot of phone calls from parents. We did look at attendance with them. In the case, if there was extenuating circumstances such as COVID or some type of doctor's note that was refurbished, we certainly took that into consideration for re-enrollment for those children. But for all extents and purposes, it was tough because you know that exactly once that student was dropped, that was it. And a lot of the same issues that we had with vacations, a lot of conversations with parents, such as a split household where it was out of their hands, plans that were made well ahead of time. And it was hard, parents showed up impromptu to have these conversations, and we spoke to each parent individually. It was extremely difficult, but the teachers and the students understood way back in June when we first started this, that once you missed 4, you could be dropped. So it was, again, and we did look at every situation. And then after the middle of July, when we ran reports and teachers with emails concerning about students, I personally looked at not just that particular class, but the other classes they were taking, and if there was a way to keep them in the program, we tried to do that. We did not want to dismiss students if we did not have to after August. We wanted to really give them that benefit of the doubt to continue. That living environment lab number is a high, as you can see. That doesn't necessarily, it was about 25 to 30 students who didn't need labs. So we did offer labs this year, which was really an opportunity for students to take the exams come August. But that number, there were students who were registered. Again, the counselors threw them in the schedule and the calendar. And when they came in looking at lab minutes, they need 1,200 lab minutes. So they needed that many minutes to actually take the Regents exam come August. And so that number is a little bit skewed, but we didn't want to water it down. I wanted to tell you exactly what it was. And obviously, the discipline, That was hard. Again, students sent into a verbal. We had students that walked off campus. We had students with arguments and fights. Also had students who brought instruments into the building that should not be allowed. And all of those things into consideration, they were dropped, automatically. Like I said, we always reference that it was a privilege and a right for summer school, and we really needed to hone in on the fact that, children coming in were there to learn and having a safe learning environment for all.
So moving right into the academic data, you can see how many 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that were enrolled in the last column. If you just take a minute to look at that, and then you can see how many students passed each course and how many students did not pass each course. So this is the middle school data for 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then we have the high school data by course. And this is just the first slide of the selection of courses. You see as 2 columns. You have the elective starting with African American Lit on the left. In the middle is field bio, so you actually have 2 columns of courses. And same thing, total enroll, passed, failed. And then is there another section? And then that's the rest of it. I didn't break down the percentages, but if you need the percentages, I can get that back to you for the pass-fail data. So recommendations. So Andy and I jumped on board about the second week in June, planning for summer school. We were able to put 2 master schedules together, and so we had an opportunity to meet with senior team and collaborate with some recommendations for planning for next year. So we definitely believe that planning for secondary summer school needs to begin in the winter, and there needs to be more support for our special education students and our E&L students. And it would be really nice if the larger entity, you did see the large numbers, was broken down into smaller entities, such as elementary schools, such as maybe a program at Maine, the largest entity, and at North, and if not at West, at least have 2 programs for secondary, high school, and as well for middle school. We do believe, after experiencing this, that it would be managed better if there was more also administrative support as well. Continue the rest.
Yep, a couple of things also as well, just to have a specific administrator assigned to really the Regents administration. We had a huge number of students that turned out for our Regents exams in August. We really want to shout out and thank you, Mr. Dodd, who's in the audience, really helping us really framework and put out everything. So we had a huge turnout and make sure it went smoothly. And I think for overall our participation went very well for that particular 2 days of Regents exams. Continue with the in-person registration. Continue progress reports and final report cards. Also, we had some safety concerns. You remember we had three campuses here, NFA West, you have NFA North, and you have NFA Maine. Some students were put there for safety transfers, so now there was concern that once we had one place where summer school was held at, that we could have some safety concerns from students as well. So we have to shift through that as well and articulate some of those concerns moving forward. Overall, some of the celebrations, so this is a bright spot. We did have 49 students who graduated on August 29th, and 1,100, almost 1,200 credits were gained. And I think that's a huge testament. Yep. It's a huge testament to our teachers and staff, including our security, Ms. Joyce Howard, who really did an amazing job helping us throughout summer school. And I thought, for a presentation to end for us on celebrations, we could have pictures up there, but we really wanted you to see a face of a child who attended summer school, who took an opportunity to come back and gain not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 credits, passing all 4. So I'm going to ask Javon Boone, if you would come on up. Come on up, Mr. Boone. So this is relationships are everything. And I had a senior that was supposed to make it. He had an obligation. He called last minute, he couldn't make it. So I went outside when we were all in executive session, and I was having some food, and some families were out there, and Javon walks right up to me. Now, he's an NFA West student. He's not one of mine, NFA Maine. Comes up to me and says, "Hey, how are you?" So I start to talk to him. I was like, "How you doing? What, you look familiar." He's like, "Yeah, I was in summer school." "Really? Summer school?" I said, "Wow." I said, "Tell me about it." And you know what? This child I had coming in who was a senior would have been a really a powerful story. But his story is something else. So I want to turn it over to Javon so he can tell you a little bit about what he did this summer, because it's not just the credits he recovered. But I mean, I have a son who's 16, and I need to take half of his work ethic and bring it home to me, to my son. But I want you to tell them what you did in the summer for summer school. But then I want you to, importantly, to talk about, Javon, if you could, what you did after summer school ended, okay, when your day ended at 12:30. Introduce yourself. Yes, you can.
So I took the four classes I took were ELA, math, and global, and Italian. So I had a hard time with Italian because I never took it before. So of course I failed that class. And after summer school was over, I also was working at BOCES after summer school, and whenever on Fridays I would be there all day. So I came from summer school, got on the bus, went home, and then my mom had to bring me down to the waterfront or to BOCES so we can clean up the waterfront or Washington headquarters or go into BOCES and do some office work, and then or help move boxes. And that was very tiring.
How old are you again?
I'm 16.
Yeah.
I also tried out for the competition team at Newburgh Performing Arts, and I actually did get in for the junior hip hop team. And since I'm in the 10th grade, I'm in the 10th grade, and everything's been going well ever since I got back into school. And Ms. Lakia actually has been helping me since I got back into school with my grades in my classes, especially geometry, because I'm horrible at math.
I think it was important when I went outside and I was stuffing my face with the many different types of spicy food that I was trying to, I need some water. But when he told me his story, it resonated because it's not a number, right? Children aren't numbers, it's a story behind that. And you needed to see a program like this. He's now on track, on grade level in 10th grade because he took advantage of the programs that we offered at the high school and gained not one, not two, but like I said, 4 credits to recover. And so I was very proud of him. His story was amazing, and I felt it just was fate and divine happened. We just got in together, had a conversation, and here he is. So I want to thank you so much. And I know you're at West, so hopefully you'll come to Maine and see some events that we have there as well, sporting events, right? Mm-hmm. And good luck with Newburgh Performing Arts. So we give a round of applause to Javon.
Board members, anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Howard.
Thank you,
You're
Madam
really
President.
on today.
I was sick last week, so I got to make up for it. No, but truly, this is a great program, and I have a few questions. So, the 3 absences and then 4th when you drop, how vigorous is the intervention after 1 absence? And I know we said we make robocalls. I know we said we send letters, but real talk. An absence should be a face-to-face with a parent. I've come across so many parents in the community who, and trust me when I say this, I know there's always their story, our story, and somewhere in the middle there's the truth. But they didn't know. Nobody contacted them. They had no idea. And I know that's not true to that degree, but what interventions are we using? Because when you're talking about 3 absences, that can happen in a week. And sometimes it can. What are we doing after the first absence, number 1? And then also, what are we doing to understand the importance of summer school and the role it plays with our cohort graduation rates? And is it, at some point in time, is it ever mandatory that a kid has to go to summer school? Is it always a recommendation, a suggestion? Is it something that they don't have to do? They can decide they want to do it? Because I think at some point in time, we need to understand the importance of this program. And when a kid fails, you have to go to school. I remember when I used to go to school here, That was a long time ago. But you failed, you were in summer school. You failed a class, you had to take a summer school class. I don't know, I guess, well, we won't talk about that. But what are we doing to try to impact those numbers? Because I heard there was a lot of issues up there this summer. And the last question I want to ask you guys, I know there were some problems. Did you guys have the exit interview with downtown and just talk about what we can do better and what can happen this year to impact next summer's program? And is it in place now? Are we doing it?
So I'll jump in with the first question about attendance, about after that first absence. Not enough. We need to do more, honestly. It was ourselves. We had, I think one clerical staff in our building, NFA Main. Counselors, we had one, Mr. McAllister, who literally the first week, students were lined up, concerned about, I didn't need this course, I want to take this course, can I take this course? I don't even want to know what it would look like if we didn't have in-person registration, because we had them on the calendar, but then we invited them to come in, and we continue to take parents in, take them in. But certainly looking at it was like 392 drops that I had to do that Friday. And it was gut-wrenching for 6 hours. It was click, 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 and every child, it was like looking at their attendance was 5 or 6 absences. A lot of the kids, we had made phone calls. Unlike elementary, we had 18-year-olds that are working. They took opportunities to get a job to help provide for their families, care for their families. They had to stay home. They couldn't come in at 8 o'clock in the morning because they had to watch their younger sibling because their parents had worked an overnight. They had to clean. It was a lot of the same conversations we have during the year. But because it's so condensed and we continue to say it's, like you said, the 3 absences and you could jump in, but really it was hard because it was just us and we had Mr. McAllister. And so at the high school, just sticking to 9 through 12 when they're gaining credits, they hit that 4 threshold or 5. And then after the middle of July, it was literally like not just dropping a kid for like 4. It was like literally looking at their grades and seeing what's going on. So it wasn't just, I'm just going to drop them because the teacher said they haven't been. And then patterns. Has it been 3 in a row, 4 in a row? Have they continued to miss, calling home? And, we can do more of advertising as far as our student information, getting out from parents' phone numbers, accurate numbers and things like that, so we can have accurate information to call them, because a lot of times we had done that as well. I don't want to.
Ms. Peterson, you wanted to jump in here?
I just wanted to also say that was one of the reasoning for in-person, so that the parents knew from day one what was the expectation around attendance to do the intervention upon registration. We also try to facilitate making sure that we did have registration at summer school registration to facilitate enrollment and update it. So updates to the system, so if a parent is in front of me and something is incorrect, that I had a personnel with the summer school staff to try to correct that. Because we know that with absences and ESYP, there's only so much. We have to make sure that students are in the seats for a certain amount of time.
I have a question. And my question is on page 12. It's the data, the pass-fail data. What I'm looking at are those critical courses that students fail over time. History shows it, and I'm sure people in the audience are going to go like this when I say English, living environment, global studies are always the ones that hold the kids back. Looking at your data, that reinforces what I'm saying, because this is not the first time they're taking this in repeat, and maybe 2 and 3 times. So what can we do to help enhance the learning that's going on, to be able to help the kids get the content so they can do better in their courses? And that's a big question, and I know it's not for you to answer right now, but I understand that's something that has to be looked at, because this is what's holding the kids back. Dr. Farrell.
One of the things we need to do, first of all, we're ready to start planning for next summer now. We have to take a look at how we staff, how we structure classes. We should also look at the time of day we offer secondary summer school. Traditionally, as the folks have stated, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning. That may not be a good summer plan for teenagers. Maybe we need to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe we need to look at afternoon classes as well as morning classes for students who are working and have family responsibilities. We have to meet our kids and our families where they are if they're going to be successful. Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results over and over. One of the things we need to do is look at our data. We need to look at our course failures, talk to the teachers, look at the individual students' records. What did they master? What did they not master? Sometimes that's difficult to tease out. We can look at the Regents exams, particularly for Global. Global 2 is a much more difficult course in my perception than Global 1. We need to look at what we have to offer to our students so that when they challenge the Regents again, they're better prepared. We also need to offer more extensive Regents preparation courses in addition to what we're doing in summer school. So if you're taking Global, if you're sitting for English 11, if you're sitting for World History, if you're sitting for Algebra, you have a Regents review attached to that, even if it's not for the full 6 weeks of the program, maybe it's 3 weeks that you do Regents review on top. That's going to be expensive because we're going to need more staff, we're going to need more support. We also need more social workers working in the program over the summer, not to mitigate the skills and abilities of guidance and our instructional staff, because they're important. But the social workers have a different relationship sometimes with families. They'll go out and do the home visits and find out why someone hasn't come to school more easily than our other staff can tease out. Those are just some of the things we're talking about and thinking about moving forward.
I think you said something very important, and that is each student doesn't need the same thing. Everybody doesn't, just like we don't need the same thing. So maybe communication with the teachers that had these kids during the year, they can tell you what the kids need and what they don't. So maybe that needs to be teased out, and those teachers need to be talked to about maybe, you know, Carol needs a more visual learning and she really didn't get anything in Algebra 1. You know what I mean? So I think the teachers will be a big help with that.
And Madam President, if I may, one thing you mentioned about recommendations, you know, we did have some high class sizes, and that will surely lean to a child to maybe struggle more often than not if it were smaller sizes, but we did what we had with what we had with staffing. So it was kind of like, you know, obviously if we had more folks that would want to participate in summer school too, then we would have smaller class sizes and offer more sections for some of the Global or ELA or English 11 classes that the students need to take to graduate.
Sorry. The other piece is we need to look at the attendance of the students who are coming to summer school. Some of our students who attended had good attendance during the year. We need to maintain attendance structure for summer school. I'm not trying to imply that kids don't have to come. They need to be there. But students who had or surpassed the 85% threshold had their seat time. They need to master the content so that those students are in a little bit different category than students who had poor attendance and don't have the seat time in either. And we need to look at how we group the students based on those factors, because those students perhaps can do a deeper dive and more, in some senses, acceleration in preparation for mastering the material and sitting for the Regents than the students who need to go through the full program and have greater gaps also caused by poor attendance.
Thank you.
So just to piggyback, we know that we have some things that we need to do differently and better for next year. And not only are we going to begin our planning in October, but we've also discussed credit recovery programs to begin in November for January to support students. And we will start our plan for the June and August Regents in February. So we know that we have to get ahead of it. And so that's something that we're certainly looking into. And it's been a big conversation because we know that students learn differently and we have to look at different student profiles.
Mr. Lamar.
Yeah, I'm looking at the middle school results page. I'm just curious, the English and math results, it shows English that a full 2/3 of the students did not pass, and math, a full 3/4 of the students did not pass. Is that a reflection of how underprepared they were in their 8th grade school year, or is that a failure in that class of not getting them there?
I think it's probably both. Andy and I spent most of our time in the high school because of staffing issues, but it looks like it's a combination of both, how they were prepared during the school year and how well they did in the summer, which yielded how well they did in the summer. So I think it's a combination. Do you have anything to add?
No, for being there, the times that we were there, it was definitely a full house. They were there for sure. I think that sometimes you look at the dynamics of the breakdown of the classes too, coming in. But we were, blessed with the opportunity to lead summer school, right? But certainly, like Dr. Campbell said, having that planning earlier, having deeper conversations like in March and not late June, which we're talking about now, would lead to positive outcomes for sure. Because, we're not happy with that either, for sure, looking at that.
And I just want to say one more thing, especially for the middle school. We had teachers reaching out to us that wanted support. We did have some additional staff, and we were able to send 4 teachers over there to push in for a co-teaching session, but they still needed more. So, that has been discussed to be part of the planning, and as well as supporting the ENL and special ed population as well in both programs.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
So then what's the plan moving forward? It's exactly what you said, right? So you have, I didn't do the math here. I would have loved to have seen the percentages, not just the numbers, but the percentage of, students that ended up failing. And so, it really is an opportunity, to be more intentional, be more student-driven, make sure the data is very clear and folk know what we have a group of students right here, right now, that we know this school has started, they should be a focus, and they should not be allowed to not be a focus because we know who they are, right? And then you have the others, but those you have. And there's no reason why at this point that, well, maybe there are reasons because it's not just the school, it's other, it's a combination, right? But we do have a cohort, we have a groups of students right here and now that you can track and track and track.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Burton, because that's very important. Thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on now. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction Secondary, Dr. Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I bring you Resolution 6.1 through 6.4 for consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
Second.
Questions or discussion on these items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Doré?
That concludes my items. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. The Exceptional Learner Division has 2 items in the consent agenda, 7.1 and 7.2, for the board's consideration.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard?
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Ms. Roaring.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance Division presents items 8.1 to 8.7 for consent this evening.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Ms. Roaring. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 9.1 through 9.14 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, sir.
9.1 H2, I'm separating out my wife so I can abstain.
Thank you. Anybody else separate out anything else?
Yes, Madam President.
Yes, sir.
I would like to move to table an item,
Okay.
item G4.
So point of order, somebody should just separate out 9.1 first.
Okay, so
So Mr. Howard just asked us to separate out 9.1.
9.1.
I'd like to separate it out. Thank you.
Now, repeat again for me, Mr. Levinstein, you want 9.1 H2
Correct.
separated out. And then, so we should do that first, and I should get all the others? All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion on everything except for 9.1. Okay. Questions, or now he tables it, correct?
Okay, now I'm moving.
Before we vote?
Correct.
No.
No? Tell me.
You have to vote on 9.2 through 9.14, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion on those? Roll call, Mr. Clerk, on those.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
Mr., you had one you wanted to table?
Yes, Madam President. I would like to move to table item G4.
9.1G.
Point of order, ma'am.
Okay.
9.1 has to be on the floor first.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to entertain a motion, please, on 9.1.
So moved. Minus H2?
Yes. Minus H2. Thank you.
Okay, I get it.
I need a second. Thank you. Any questions or discussion on everything except for H2? Now, can he do that?
Now I move to table.
Now you move to table.
Thank you. Madam President, I'd like to move to table item G4, 9.G4.
Okay, so I have a motion to table. I need a second. Okay, roll call to table, please.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes. So I think we still have 9.1 minus H2 on the floor, so I'd like to have a roll call on that.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
We're going to go to 9.1 H2. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? No. Roll call, please.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré?
Thank you. And I'm sure whoever made Robert's Rules of Order, it does not work for me. Thank you. Mr. McLemore, you have something else you have for us?
Madam President, I'd like to request permission to add an item.
Would you read it to us, please?
Yes. Be it resolved, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, that the Board of Education hereby approves the terms of a supplemental memorandum of agreement dated September 16, 2022, between the district and the NTA.
Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda, please. Roll call to add.
Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Okay, now I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes?
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar?
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein?
How about your second one, Mr. McLemore?
Thank you, Madam President. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, that the Board of Education hereby approves the terms of a supplemental memorandum of agreement dated September 16th, 2022, between the district and the NTA.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda, please. Roll call to add.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Madam President, thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to the Clerk of the Board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from the September 13th regular meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Doré? Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you. We're now at the portion of the agenda for public discussion on non-agenda
We did
items.
non-agenda items already in the
We
beginning.
did? Oh,
Yeah.
we did. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we're going to pass that over. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Lamar? Mr. Levinstein? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Walker? Ms. Burton? Mr. Doré?
Thank you and good night.